Welcome to The Gut Show. I'm your host, Erin Judge, registered dietitian and founder of Gutivate. I'm also your fellow IBS warrior. Our goal on this side of the internet is to empower those with IBS and digestive disorders to understand their gut better, to have a healthier relationship with their bodies, and to make confident choices to improve their digestive health. During this season, you can expect a conversation around a hot topic related to gut health, digestion, and IBS. As a disclaimer, I am a dietitian, but I am not your dietitian. So everything covered in this episode is meant to be educational and is purely information that you can take back to your healthcare team in order to make the best decisions for you. If you're new here and something just doesn't feel right in your gut, if your symptoms have led you to this podcast, I invite you to start by taking the quiz, What's Your Poop Personality? Your personality type will unveil what your symptoms may mean, what may be causing them, and what you can do about them. This is a free quiz and you can take it today at gutivate.com or find the direct link below in the show notes. While you're going to take the quiz, let's jump into today's episode. Welcome back to The Gut Show. I'm your host, Erin. I'm excited that you're here. And today we're going to talk about something that has created one of my most viral videos on social media, and that is chewing. I would say at least 75% to 80% of the clients that I work with in my practice as a dietitian are not chewing their food enough. If I were to look around, which I don't really, because that's weird, I would guess if I was at a restaurant, at least probably 50 to 75% of people in that room are not chewing enough. And this is a huge problem whenever we are thinking about solving, managing digestion symptoms. And it's a place where oftentimes we need to start when it comes to food intolerances and symptoms specifically related to food or meals. So what's the deal? And how can you start chewing better and feel confident with how you are chewing your food? That's what we're going to talk about. And this isn't an episode I want you to roll your eyes at and be like, oh, whatever, and chew my food. No. I want you to enter with an open mind because, again, most people are not doing this enough. And whenever we make this shift for clients and they truly do make the shift, really commit to it, change their habits around how they chew, it can make such a big difference and often can help with those kind of pesky, annoying symptoms during the day, like bloating and just feeling a little uncomfortable after lunch and feeling sluggish by the end of the day, being really gassy. Those are the symptoms that we're going to attack here. So if you have those symptoms, this is worth your time. So what is chewing and why is it important? So whenever you are chewing, this refers to the mechanical breakdown of food from your teeth. So you are closing your teeth, opening your teeth, closing your teeth, and your teeth, these basically bones, are breaking down the particles of food that you eat. That's called mechanical digestion, where we break down these food particles and we mix them with saliva, which is chemical digestion, because saliva also has an enzyme that helps you break down your carbohydrates. It's called salivary amylase. And so you are chewing and you are physically breaking down particles. Saliva is being released, and as you chew and churn food, right, because it kind of moves its way from the front of your mouth to the back of your mouth, around your teeth, side to side, as you're chewing, it mixes with saliva. So those particles become smaller, they become softened, and then they make their way to the back of the mouth where then you swallow and they go down your esophagus. And your esophagus is able to transport those food particles because they are broken down, they are softened, and they are mixed together from the chewing process. So some signs that you are not chewing enough are that you have undigested food in your stool, because the first part of breakdown is your mouth. And I think this is really funny because sometimes clients will ask about this, or people on social media will message me and say, I have huge full beans or full kernels of corn coming out in my stool. A little bit of like tomato skins, a few things are going to make their way into your stool. Having a little bit of undigested food is totally fine. But if you have full pieces of food coming out in your poop, you did not chew your food. Like, let's think logically, right? It's not even that your body failed to digest that food. Like, you didn't chew it to begin with. So, of course, it's going to come out in your poop, right? It didn't even get a chance to break down. We didn't even chew it. And some foods are going to be harder to break down, and chewing is part of that. So, that's one signal that you might not be chewing enough. Another signal that we see really often is upper GI pressure and symptoms when you eat. So, when I say upper GI, the GI tract, the gastrointestinal tract, is all one tube, mouth to anus. So, include your mouth, we have your esophagus, then we have your stomach, then we have your small intestine, your large intestine, to your rectum, and then out your anus. This is all connected, but these are kind of segmented parts of the GI tract. So typically upper GI is going to refer to about stomach up to esophagus, a little bit of the small intestine, whereas lower GI is going to be like small intestine typically to large intestine. Much lower is definitely more the large intestine or the colon, interchangeable words. So when we talk about upper GI symptoms, this refers to pressure that's kind of rib cage up, pain or burning upper side of the rib cage in your stomach or esophagus, belching, so release of gas through your mouth, which typically is coming from the stomach or the esophagus, choking, reflux, all of that is considered upper GI. Now, the reason why upper GI symptoms happen if you don't chew enough is that whenever you're breaking food down here in your mouth, if it is not broken down well, it can get stuck in the esophagus and problems can occur here. Also, you're putting a lot more load on your stomach. So I mentioned that whenever you produce saliva, you produce an enzyme that starts the breakdown of certain foods, salivary amylase. It breaks down certain carbohydrates. So that's why if you left like a piece of bread in your mouth and just sat there for a minute, it dissolves. That is the benefit of salivary amylase. So that's one thing that's happening with that saliva production. Another thing that is happening is that whenever you start producing saliva, that starts to send a signal to the rest of the GI tract that it needs to start turning on and that food is coming, right? Because our body needs to communicate like, hey, we're eating, food is coming, time to turn on digestion, because you're not just digesting fully all the time. You digest when you eat food. So one part of that is stomach acid production and the kind of muscle activity of the stomach. You're going to produce stomach acid when food hits your stomach, but sometimes there can be a bit of like a lag or kind of poor coordination in the stomach because we're going too quickly and the stomach didn't know that food was coming, right? That could be something that's happening with that poor communication. Or if some of those carbohydrates that should have been broken down from saliva or those food particles are just so big entering the stomach, that can cause problems. In terms of the food particles themselves, your stomach has like two sections. And the first section, whenever food comes in, it kind of hugs the food. So it hugs the food and starts that kind of churning process that we're familiar with. We call it kind of like the washing machine in the stomach. It's like it's squeezing and releasing and squeezing and releasing. And that's where you're starting to break down those particles even more. We're mixing the food with stomach acid for breakdown. There's the release of pepsin, which is going to start breaking down some proteins. So there's some stuff happening through that kind of squeezing, churning part of the upper part of the stomach. Then once things move to a certain consistency, so they're getting smaller and more mixed together, it moves to the second part of the stomach. And there it then gets ready to release into the small intestine. So there's like a sphincter that is like the pyloric sphincter that releases then this what has been formed into the small intestine for further digestion. There's only so much capacity in the stomach, both at the bottom. So if things aren't emptying out of the stomach properly, that can cause kind of a bit of an overflow into the upper part of the stomach. But also in the upper part of the stomach, that squeezing, churning activity, there's only so much space for it. The stomach stretches, but it can only stretch so far. The volume of your food matters when we think about how much space it takes up in the stomach. If you were to, and this might sound a little unpleasant, but just kind of picture this with me. If I were to place a giant bowl of broccoli in front of you, just whole, think about how much space that takes up. If you were to chew up all of that broccoli, spit it back out into a different bowl, think about how much space that takes up. And you can do this activity if you're like, I'm a visual learner and I need to see this to like fully comprehend this. You ate the same amount of broccoli, but simply breaking it down into smaller particles takes up less space overall. Cooking it down takes up less space, right? That is going to matter in your stomach. If the stomach has been at maximum capacity and we're trying to overstuff it, you're going to feel more discomfort, more bloat. You also may start getting extra pressure on the lower esophageal sphincter that leads into the stomach. When there's extra pressure, that sphincter opens, and stomach acid, as well as different contents of the stomach, can move up into the esophagus, which is where we deal with reflux and symptoms there. You also can experience vomiting or kind of choking or coughing food up. All of that can happen because of that pressure. So, chewing not only helps chemically start breaking things down so that there's not a lag later on, it helps with communication down the line, especially with the stomach, but also helps with the way that space is filled in the stomach. So, if you're not chewing enough, there may be more symptoms for those reasons. Another thing that can happen that's a signal that you're not chewing enough, kind of related to that as well, you feel full fast when eating. It's a mouthful. Feel full fast. This means that you get really, really full very quickly, maybe even too quickly. And some people may think, well, that's a good thing because then I'm eating less, or if you've been told you need to eat less, that might be a good thing in your head. The problem is that that can lead to discomfort and that can lead to you not meeting your nutrition needs. So an hour later, you're hungry again and you need to eat again. And so you're not able to space meals out. So for some people, this, maybe it can feel like a good thing, but that signal of being full too quickly means that the digestive system, again, is not working at the best capacity. And you're likely overfilling the stomach with too much volume and it's not able to kind of do its job well. And that can lead to pain and discomfort if you deal with visceral hypersensitivity like we see in IBS. So that can become a problem. And then another way to know that you may not be chewing enough is that you have increased bloat after meals and you just feel like everything is sluggish and not digesting as it should be. This is a huge signal that chewing may be part of the puzzle. There's other things that can be part of that puzzle, what you eat, how it's digested, your stress, all of that. But chewing is a huge piece of that. And if you're dealing with bloat, especially after meals, assessing your chewing and focusing on it is going to only help versus hurt. So definitely something that I would be thinking about if I am dealing with more bloat.
Are you listening to today's episode with the main thought being, what are the steps that I can take to get rid of my symptoms right now? While I hope that the information that we share in every episode of The Gut Show leaves you feeling more empowered and more confident in your body, it's not always going to solve your problem or give you a clear direction for your specific symptoms and your needs. The Master Method membership is an online program for the person with chronic digestive symptoms and IBS who wants step by step guidance to understand their body, address the drivers of IBS, reduce symptoms, and build resilience in your gut long term. This membership includes a step by step course and a dietitian led community that teaches you how to holistically address each symptom and the IBS drivers, how to reduce symptoms more strategically and with confidence, and guidelines for better gut health long term so that you're not only thinking about today, but you're also improving your outcomes in the future. It is time to ditch the symptoms and get your life back. The membership is your first step. You can learn more and enroll at ibsmastermethod.com and use the code GUTSHOW, GUTSHOW, GUTSHOW for $25 off your enrollment fee. Now, let's get back to today's episode.
So, how much should you be chewing? And what should this look like? This is where it gets a little tricky, and this is where the viral video that I posted comes into play. I posted a video of me chewing a salad because I typically don't eat salads myself, and this is a big reason why. And I just don't really love them. I like cooked vegetables. But, anyways, I was eating a salad and I thought, hey, this is a great opportunity to talk about this because salads are foods that or meals that are typically not chewed well, and I can demonstrate what this looks like and kind of talk about this. So I demonstrated like how long it took me to chew a fairly large bite of salad, and it was, I think, like 30 seconds for the bite. And so, of course, the comments are all, oh, I would have finished my whole salad by now. Like I, could have done X, Y, and Z by now. There's no way I would ever do that. A lot of comments like that, which only goes to show how few people are chewing enough, because that seemed outrageous to the people watching. And it brings up a really important point about how long should you be chewing. It depends on what you were eating and how much is needed to break that food down. So remember whenever I talked to you about your volume of food that's filling your stomach, right? That bowl of broccoli. I want you to also picture a bowl of raw broccoli. So just raw stalk of broccoli. And then picture you cooking that broccoli down. So you cut it up and you cook it down for a while, how it shrinks. A really easy example is spinach. A bowl of spinach versus cooked spinach. A completely different amount of volume, right? It looks different. Now I want you to think about holding a green bean, pretty firm, raw green bean. You cook it down, it starts to get a little bit limp. Same with a carrot, right? It's soft. You might be able to easily just kind of tear it open or cut it with a fork versus whenever it was raw, it was very firm. It was much harder. It was more in its own shape and form, right? It was going to be more hardy, more strong, more difficult to break down. That is what we want to consider when we're thinking about how long it's going to take you to chew a meal properly. If the food is in a raw, large volume form, you are going to need to chew more to break that down into the smallest particle you can in order to digest it well, compared to something that is cooked down even more. So let's look at the spectrum. The largest volume that we have that requires more chewing work would be like a raw salad, raw vegetables, raw fruits, raw foods. A little further down that spectrum would be lightly cooked foods. So maybe you just pan seared it, fried it, roasted it a little bit. So still crunchy, right? There's still some form to it. You can start to cut it, but it's not easily cut or broken down. We're moving down that spectrum. The next part would be very soft, well cooked down food. Steamed vegetables, you maybe simmered it in a sauce for a little bit longer. You're cooking it down in a soup. They're well cooked down. It does not take much at all to start cutting, breaking down. Even you could probably even mash it with a fork if you really wanted to and applied some pressure. We're going to require a little less work. And then the furthest of that spectrum is fully pureed food. So a pureed butternut squash soup, a pureed tomato soup, a smoothie. Those foods are going to already be in a very like liquid, very soft, broken down form. You're going to use a lot less chewing in order to get those to the consistency you want. So instead of thinking about how many bites should you take, how many seconds should it take to chew a bite of food, I want you to think about the end goal you are working towards, and then you can decide how to cook your food in order to make it easier for you to break down and also to chew. So the end goal is that we break our food down to applesauce consistency as we chew. Applesauce consistency. And if you haven't eaten applesauce in a while, especially my IBS girlies, if you are avoiding apples because of FODMAPs, just grab some applesauce, take a bite or two, save it for later, but just understand that consistency and like feel it. Notice how it feels in your mouth. This is how you will know and probably say like, "Oh, yeah, I'm definitely not chewing enough." I fall into this sometimes. If I really do take inventory or think about it, it's like, "Oh, yeah, I have not been chewing enough. I've been rushing." So, applesauce consistency is the end goal. If you are eating a salad, that is going to take a long time to get to applesauce consistency. That doesn't mean it's bad or that you can't eat it. But if you have roadblocks of time, some people in that video mentioned like sensory issues or like the way that things feel in your mouth over a period of time. So if you have problems with that, if you have difficulty chewing due to like your jaw tension, TMJ, mouth, like the strength of your mouth, but also your teeth, if that becomes a problem, then instead of just saying, well, I can't chew enough because of these problems, understand that they're barriers. And what you can do is chop those foods a bit more, cook them down a bit more. Think about that spectrum, and that will require less time chewing to get to that end goal of applesauce consistency, right? Those are things to consider. Time as well is important, just because if you have a lunch break of, an hour, you might be able to prep a salad and have plenty of time to chew that meal as much as you need to. If you only have 15 to 20 minutes to eat lunch, you may go more for a soup. That actually might be easier for you to chew with the time you have available, break it down and digest it well. So that's how you think about that, make it practical for you. Now, with me talking about this, if all you're thinking is, there is no way. I can't, like, I'm cringing. I want to jump out of my seat. I do not want food in my mouth that long. If you have dealt with choking in the past and you're like, I just would rather puree everything because I am scared I'm going to choke, like, I just haven't been successful with chewing, that could be a sign that something is going on with your mouth. And your actual mechanics around chewing that's working against you. And that is okay to admit and say, because there are resources that can help you. And so many people aren't chewing enough, or they hear that they're not. They may beat themselves up instead of thinking, why am I not? Like, is this something I'm actually struggling with? Because it is normal to be able to chew your food really well. And so if that's happening, then I would say, if it's a texture problem, a choking problem, going to meet with an ears, nose, and throat doctor to look at your throat and how that's working. Maybe even a speech pathologist. They can be really helpful. Speech language pathology, occupational therapy. Oftentimes they're really helpful with like chewing and the process itself, especially for textures. Can be extremely helpful. If it is fully texture and maybe related to neurodivergence like ADHD or autism, then working with your therapist or psychologist on some cognitive behavioral, maybe paired with speech language pathology, can be really helpful to try to make this work and find a blend of these resources that can work really well for you. And then if it's your jaw or your teeth, like really working with your dentist and seeing like, okay, is there infection? Is there, something going on with my gums? Like, are there ways to address this so that, again, I can use these tools and support the digestion process? All of that can be really helpful. I don't want you to just say, I have these barriers, or that just isn't for me. I'm not a chewer. I can't do that. And neglect something that might be really supportive for you long term. Because as I mentioned, this is the start of digestion. And if you are dealing with IBS or any kind of condition where your digestion, the function of your digestive system is already not working well, if you set up the process every meal in a poor way by not chewing, it's only going to work less well, right? And so you're kind of working against yourself even more versus like really giving yourself this ability to turn digestion on the best way you can. Oftentimes that can make a huge difference. So something definitely to think about. Some other things to consider with this are, what are some of the trigger points that you can put in place to remind yourself to chew? Because chewing can be a habit, and not chewing well, eating quickly is also a habit. And a lot of times it is put on us by our schedules, very short breaks, people, whenever we're younger, sometimes if you have siblings, if you're hurrying to finish so that you can go do something else that you want to, or there's a race to finish so you can eat everything that you need, there's been some insecurity there. There's a lot of reasons for that. Scarcity, if you were in the military. I know my husband was in the military, and he talks about their training is like literally head down, scooping food into your mouth, eating as quickly as possible. That builds a habit that really works against you. We're also conditioned a lot of times to just eat quickly even in social settings, right? So that we can talk, or you don't want to be the last one, you're keeping up with everybody else. There's a lot of that that can happen. And so, kind of taking inventory of like what actually is going on day to day, and when do I notice that I chew more, I take my time more versus whenever I'm rushed. What does that look like? And then figure out how to address that situation in a better way. So again, if it's your lunch break time, maybe you cook food down more and you remove some of that barrier. Maybe you step away from your desk and like actually take that solid 15 minutes of break. It's like really focus on your food and nothing else. Like maybe that's what you need. If there's somebody in your life you're eating with that's like setting the pace, like, maybe even just starting the conversation as you sit down with your meal, like, hey, what if we take our time and chew today? I just learned this. That can be helpful. For some people, it's setting down like your utensils after each bite so that you can actually take your time. That can be really helpful. For some of my clients, I often recommend that you just take a sticky note and just write the word applesauce on it, stick it on your refrigerator, your microwave, your lunchbox, like wherever you're actually grabbing your meal or you're targeting, starting that meal time. Have that sticky note there to remind you, like, hey, don't forget, like giving yourself that cue. Some of my clients set a timer and they kind of keep up with that just to remind them to go slowly. Find ways to set a new trigger, identify the triggers that maybe cause you to go faster, and then set a new trigger to help build that habit because habits do take time and they take a lot of effort. They're not going to happen just because you learned that chewing is important. It's likely not going to be a habit tomorrow. And so that is something that you want to consider kind of moving into building this habit so that it becomes second nature for you to take your time, slow down, and chew even more. And don't be afraid to like talk to other people about this, especially if you have a spouse, a friend, a family, anybody in your life that you're eating meals with. And if you're concerned that, like, are they going to look at me funny? Or maybe I'm going so slow. Like, I don't know. If you're in your head about it, bring it up. Like, this is something that everybody needs to know, not just people with IBS or digestion symptoms. Like, a lot of people are chewing very little, and that's disrupting their digestion. It's leading to symptoms for them too that they may want to avoid. And it can be really empowering sometimes to share information with others, share the little tidbits of info I shared with you today. And maybe you laugh about it, but then also like you can start keeping each other accountable and try, to develop better habits around your meal times that can be supportive. So I hope that was helpful. This is one tool in the toolbox. It's an important tool. It's one that I do push most of my clients on, again, because I've seen such big results for clients simply by working on this. But if you are thinking about, well, what other tools are available? How else do I approach meal times? What are some other hacks I can do to support my digestion or even more intensive therapies, like for IBS specifically, to make sure that I'm doing everything I can to get my symptoms down? I encourage you to check out our Master Method membership. You can see the info in the show notes, or consider working with us one to one. We'd love to help you with that. We love thinking inside the box, but also outside of the box, like with the chewing piece, to make sure that we're thinking about your real life, real world relationship with your gut and digestion, and what's truly going on day to day, and like understanding that every single day there are so many tools at your fingertips. And so we love empowering clients through both the membership and one-to-one with those tools so that you can feel your best again, which is what I want for you. And today it just starts with chewing. So go chew, take inventory, try some of these little experiments. And if you do, tag me, take a video, tag me, keep the conversation going with me, because I would love to see your experience with it, hear your experience, and hopefully there's a breakthrough for you. And I want to definitely cheer you on in that. So enjoy that. And join me back here next week as we talk about another little hack. And I'm going to leave you hanging on what that is. Today it was chewing. Next week it's one single hack, one little thing that you can add, a superfood, if you will, maybe, that can be really helpful to support the digestion process. So see you back here.